Hey everyone, this is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to take a look at Mercury's retrograde, which is coming through this Friday. Mercury is turning retrograde in the sign of Taurus, and will be doing so in almost an exact conjunction with the planet Uranus. There's a lot of other features about this Mercury retrograde cycle that are pretty interesting. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at 10 different features of this Mercury retrograde that will be shaping it and giving it its unique flavor. So hopefully that gets us ready for it, in addition to Eclipse this week and another eclipse coming up in another couple of weeks, a big Mercury retrograde. So that's what we're getting into today. Before we do that, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel to grow, and you also contribute some of your own thoughts and ideas into the comments section. As you guys know, it's really nice to hear your thoughts and just create a little community atmosphere around the post so that people can also share their own insights and stories. If you ever have a story to share, for example, if something comes up around this Mercury retrograde, use the hashtag grabbed and then tell us the transit Mercury retrograde, and then tell us the way it appeared in your life. We collect those and do storytelling episodes every once in a while, as you guys know. So you can also email it to us, grabbed@nightlightastrology.com, if you want to. Also, we are off to a great start in enrollment season right now. If we go over to the website, nightlightastrology.com, and click on the courses tab, the first year program is starting again in June. So it begins on June 11th. And if you go to the first year course under the courses tab, you can learn about what the course includes, hear what some alumni have had to say about it in a video we have there. The class this is going to be, in my opinion, one of the more interesting periods under which to begin a study of astrology. And that's because Pluto has just changed signs into Aquarius. And I believe that astrology is going to be greatly impacted by this, as well as by some of the upcoming transits. And around 2025, for example, Uranus goes into Gemini and starts trining Pluto in Aquarius. I have a feeling, it's just a hunch, I'm not a psychic or anything, but I have a feeling that astrology as an industry is about to go into some really uncharted territory, maybe with the advancement of what we can do with some of the software programs we use, or delineation techniques, and how we can, train people with various, the way that we can design software to help people learn astrology. These are things that I'm thinking a lot about and getting really excited about. And anyway, it's an interesting time to delve more deeply into the study of astrology, and which is really a blossoming field right now. And people can be taking this class either to develop as a professional, or because it's your personal passion or spiritual practice or hobby, and you want to develop that at a deeper level. Astrology will help you throughout the course of your entire life to chart your experiences and be able to reflect deeply on the different seasons of life and know when they're coming and what they entail. That alone makes astrology a valuable tool for every individual to have, regardless of whether or not you read for other people. But then there's a lot of people who have the gift of being able to translate the language for people who know nothing about astrology and read their charts for them. So this course can cover whatever your intention might be. There's 30 classes on the year. They're 2 to 3 hours each. They are also guest lectures that come in outside of those 30 lectures. We have a group forum discussion with lots of ongoing question and answer sessions with a staff of tutors that are always answering questions within 24 hours. We have breakout study sessions between classes, so you can always join those and deepen your understanding of topics that might be a little tricky. You can ask questions of me throughout the whole class. Everything's recorded, so you can attend live or participate remotely. Anyway, at the bottom of the page, if you have any other questions, by the way, you can email us, info@nightlightastrology.com. At the bottom of the page, you'll find enrollment options. The best deal is the early bird rate. That saves you about $500 off. And then you have a payment plan, which if you want, you could use and stretch your payment out over 12 months. And for some people, that's really the best. But for a whole nother group of people, we have need-based tuition assistance, and those are going fast. We have a lot of people who have applied because we've been really saying, hey, please do this early, because it's kind of a process to get these applications through the system and get you put in. It's not like the normal, the other options, which enroll you just instantly as soon as you pay. We have to go through a process of setting up a unique payment plan for each individual. So tuition assistance is there for people who really want to take the course but need some help doing it for one reason or another. You're on a fixed budget. We understand that life is sometimes really challenging and you have to work within your means. You can make an investment, but you can't go so far that it's going to hurt you. And so we always have this available for people who are like, look, my intention is to study astrology. I really want to go deeper with this subject. but I can't, I can't harm myself or my family or whatever in the process. So we don't think people should be priced out. So we have this option available. If you want to take advantage of it, just click the apply now button. We ask that people do that early because we do have a limited number available per program. And we like to get those processed and people set up with that right away. So, okay, well, that is all of my announcements for today. Let's get into this Mercury retrograde, which I'm really excited to talk about, mostly because it has so many interesting and sort of quirky features. So the Mercury retrograde, let's look at the real-time clock. Getting ahead of myself. All right, so here's the real-time clock, and we're looking at Mercury retrograde between April 21st and May 15th. So here you can see on April 21st, so Mercury has stationed, and you can see the little red S under Mercury. It's pretty close, within about 2 degrees of Uranus and Taurus as well. And this is just after the solar eclipse. So we have the solar eclipse, the sun squares Pluto, and then Mercury's turning retrograde, pretty close, closely conjoined to Uranus. So that is a powerful. It's a pretty potent looking Mercury retrograde as they go because of what is surrounding it. The context of every planetary event is really important. It's not just the event itself, it's what's happening in the greater community of planets around it. It's sort of like saying, look, you could have a day where you stub your toe. But if you stub your toe and it makes you late to your sister's wedding, that's a totally different context for stubbing your toe. You know what I mean? So similarly, like all the planets are doing something. There's the event itself, but then there's the context and how it's connected to that context that really ends up giving it the fullest description. So I want to look today at 10 contextual features that we ought to pay attention to with this Mercury retrograde. And I apologize, sometimes I accidentally forget to turn my other camera off, and it's on a battery and it charges. So you're with my grainy camera today, but oh well. Anyway, 10 features to pay attention to. Number 1, this Mercury retrograde starts in an almost exact conjunction with Uranus. And the reason that that's so important is that when you have a Mercury retrograde and the starting point is that it's slowly just stopping and sitting down right next to the god of revolution, well, that gives you a clue as to what the cycle is going to be about. It's going to be a very Uranian Mercury cycle. What does that mean? It means that the cycle could very well start with the unexpected, the unanticipated, the surprising, the shocking twist or turn that comes, whether that's through saying something shocking or receiving some news or some twist or turn of fate that comes, and it just shifts the pattern very suddenly. At its worst, the Mercury stationing along with Uranus could be a bit like the Tower card in the tarot. It's sudden, it's disruptive, it's shocking, it breaks apart structures, and no one really likes that, But then sometimes those exact same features are the ones that are very liberating and help us move beyond a feeling of being trapped or stuck in something that's no longer working. You need that sudden shift that just blasts things apart and moves things in a new direction. So consider the Uranian signature of this retrograde as something that will be making its presence felt. And that usually involves shock, rebellion, originality, inventiveness, but also the unexpected twists and turns that break apart familiar structures. Now, that's important because number 2 thing to pay attention to is the fact that this is a fixed Earth sign. And so the kinds of things that Mercury retrograde will be shaking up with its little Uranian signature will probably be things that are more deeply entrenched. It has the power to change structures that are more set in their ways or more established and secure and unmovable. In fact, one of the names that was given to what we now call fixed signs was solid and unmoving signs. So signs that, for example, fixed signs in ancient astrology were said to be, their significations often included things that repeated. They had a consistent way of expressing themselves the same way over and over again. Well, a Mercury retrograde in a fixed Earth sign along with Uranus can change established patterns pretty dramatically, or can be challenging to established patterns, which for some people will be quite disturbing, especially considering how much the sign of Taurus tends to value things like peace, power, and stability. So that ought to be an interesting feature of this retrograde cycle. Now, the third thing here is that this is the feminine temple of Venus and the moon. So when Mercury goes retrograde in this sign, one of the things that it tends to do is express the need for change in relation to things that are either Venusian or lunar. This moon sign can be very maternal, but it has a little bit more of a nature goddess feel than like a just kind of like the more like Cancer is a little bit more stereotypically maternal at times than Taurus, which is a little bit more pagan and earthy, a little bit more of the sensual, natural maternal qualities for the moon. For example, the moon in Taurus is a bit more like romantic, like a romantic painting of a beautiful natural landscape, right? As opposed to the moon in Cancer, which is, oftentimes going to be a little bit more like the picture of, a young woman who's just gotten pregnant for the first time and is ready to be a mom for the first time or something. There's crossover between the two versions of the moon, but the Taurian moon is like, I always consider it to be a little bit more of the natural, sensual, pagan goddess feeling. It's in Venus's temple after all. So things that have to do with the body, with nature, with wealth, with luxury, with the things that we enjoy, with things like food, also with concerns around things like beauty and aesthetics and appearances, peace, prosperity, power, and control, with a Venusian aura around it. These are the kinds of things that will be affected. So, for example, Mercury retrograde in Taurus can bring up the need to make aesthetic changes to your body, your wardrobe, your house. Like where the rearranging of things that Mercury retrograde often brings is essentially affecting things that are, again, Venusian and lunar. So, and that's not exhaustive, right? Like you could think about a million other things that could come up. So anything that's sort of earthy, Venusian, and lunar are going to be the subject areas within which the retrograde is moving. So one thing that you can do is you can sit down and make lists, which is a great way to practice astrology too. Lists of things that are both lunar and Venusian and earthy. So you come up with images, and that'll just put you into the archetypal realm that the retrograde is working in. And then it's not so much that you have then just made a list that will help you predict what's going to happen, as much as it is that you've made a list that will help you start to appreciate and notice the environment of the archetype. So it's like it's trying to stimulate your imagination to identify the archetypal field that you're suddenly in. And then you can start recognizing the retrograde at work a little bit more easily. Anyway, so the feminine temple of Venus and the moon, those are the topical realms, or like the glasses through which Mercury retrograde is looking. So just keep that in mind. That can affect relationships. It can affect topics like sexuality. It can affect things like the body, health, beauty, and things like art and so forth. Anyway, let's go on. Number 4, this retrograde begins as the sun squares Pluto. So not only does it have a Uranian signature happening around it, which is, remember, the context is important, but it also has a Plutonian signature, which means that the Sun Pluto the Sun Pluto qualities, transformation, depth, power, intensity, death and rebirth, reconfiguring our lives and our sense of purpose as we encounter elements of the unconscious that force us to recalibrate and reconsider things, death of the ego, changes and transitions around leaders and fathers and things like that. The Sun-Pluto dynamic, which is such a powerful moment for our conscious sense of self and purpose in the world, and how it's being transformed as we're encountering things that come up from the underworld, metaphorically, that is also coupled with the retrograde, right? So the Mercury retrograde wants to create changes that are coupled alongside of the Sun-Pluto dynamic, which is basically coming off from the solar eclipse as well. So you could also just look at it as, this is a solar eclipse. We've said a lot about the solar eclipse this week. This is a Mercury retrograde that's carrying those significations along with the Sun-Pluto significations, and trying to do work on behalf of those signatures. Number 5, look at the whole sign of Taurus in your birth chart. So, for example, if you are an Aries rising, Taurus will be in your second house. If you're a Taurus rising, Taurus is in your first. If you're a Gemini rising, it's in your 12th. We'll go through them. Cancer rising, it's in your 11th. If you're a Leo rising, Taurus is in your 10th. Virgo rising, it's in your 9th. Libra rising, it's in your 8th. Scorpio rising, it's going to be in your 7th. Sagittarius rising, your 6th. Capricorn, your 5th. Aquarius, your 4th. Pisces, your 3rd. Now, I'm not going to go through the significations of all the houses because you guys have heard me do that a million times, and you should know. I mean, in my humble opinion, if you pay attention to astrology regularly, you probably should know some of the topics of all of the houses by heart. But if not, then there is, here, I'll put up a great resource for you guys if you want to. Yeah, so there's a great, there is a great, here it is. Sorry, I'm trying to get it up on the screen. There's a lot. If you just search Hellenistic house meanings, you're going to find that there are some really nice signification. There are explanations of the significations. Let's go here. Sorry, I don't know why this is taking so long. Why? Okay, here it is. So I like this website, for example. This is a nice Benabel Wen. I don't know who this person is, but if you go down, you'll find first house explained, second house explained, third house explained. Very, very brief but helpful reminders of the meanings of the houses from a Hellenistic perspective. You will find that most of what I have to say about the houses is similar to that one. And I just looked that one up this morning. So, but yeah, there's also Chris Brennan from the Astrology podcast has a nice little graphic. Maybe at some point what I'll do is try to give I think what I should do is at some point I should put something on my website that's like a little list of references or resources, because we have those kinds of things in my programs for students, but it might be nice to have like a house meanings list somewhere on my website so I can just refer people to it. But yeah, look at the whole sign house of Taurus in your chart and take a look at the topics of that house as the ones being activated by the Mercury retrograde. That'll help you a lot. Then remember the 2 R's that come with retrogrades, which are reversals and revisions. So reversals and revisions come with retrogrades. A reversal would mean that something's going in one direction, but then it goes in the opposite direction. That's what a retrograde does, physically, but that's also what it can do symbolically, that we have reversals of fate or fortune. We're going in one way, all of a sudden there's a course change, and we start going in a completely different direction. So the reversals are a big part of retrogrades, and that could be happening on only a couple of days with a couple of events. It's not like it's happening the whole time just because the planet's retrograde, but there may be a few significant reversals. The other one is revisions. Sometimes during retrogrades, sorry, I'm so used to looking at my notes and then having a relationship with the other camera. So hi. So the other thing is revisions. You can have a series of revisions that come up during a retrograde, and on one thing or on many different things, whether it's a creative project, revising the way you show up in relationships, revising something about the way you work, a project you're working on, your appearance, or something about yourself physically or psychologically. So it's a great time for revisions. Reversals come up, and sometimes the reversals provide us for the opportunity of revision. Remember those 2 R's, reversals and revisions. They come with retrogrades. Sometimes retrogrades, number 7, also mean delays, which means that, things are just set back for a while. One of the ancient meanings of a retrograde was that things might be delayed for a little while. That often happens when Mercury is stationing to turn retrograde and you're at the airport, for example, but it can happen in other areas of life. So keep it in mind and don't react with, just don't be crazy reactive, because usually the delay only takes a little bit and then you're moving on again. All right, well, number 8, retrograde planets fall back into the primary motion. Planets in direct motion are going against the grain of the primary or diurnal motion of the sky. I've talked about this at length in many other videos in the past, but basically what that means is that they lose something of their own agency and autonomy. They fall back into the greater primary motion that everything is a part of. And I've always read that as the hand of God, fate, or destiny just taking over. Sure, the planet loses some of its agency reflected in our lives. That usually means that we lose some agency because we have a relationship with these planets that's pretty intimate in terms of our psychology. Their will and their way is associated with our thoughts, desires, wishes, hopes, opinions, and the changing landscape of our lives. So when they fall back into a greater motion that's stronger than their secondary motion, they lose their autonomy in a sort of symbolic visual sense. It's as though the planet, and so part of our lives, is swept up in a force greater than what we can overcome with the simple adjustments of our will or our desires. So there's something about surrendering and trusting that's essential for retrogrades. Number 9, there's a really important rebirth moment on May 1st and 2nd. This is, let me just show it to you actually. So let's go to May 1st and 2nd. So right around this time, what we're seeing here is Mercury is crossing over the face of the sun in the conjunction. That's a reset moment where Mercury is now going to be slowly moving out of its, because when it's moving through retrograde into the sun, it's in a phase where it's being burnt up by the sun. So it's combust. And that means it's in a weakened and compromised state. And that's often when we feel like, okay, things are really moving in a direction that I'm having to respond and deal with, and it's not totally easy. That's what those reversals, revisions, the hand of fate, the need to surrender, those kinds of things are coming up. But then when it hits the conjunction to the sun, it's like it's being reset, and it will start to rise and gain its own light and distance from the sun and come into its position as the morning star, where often there's a feeling of being born again. So this rebirth moment, if you're looking for a little light during the cycle, you're like, wow, this has been intense. Just remember that May 1st and 2nd, as it goes through the conjunction with the sun, it experiences a reset. And for most people, the cycle tends to be, you tend to integrate and start moving beyond the more stressful part of the cycle at this point. So for some people, that's nice to know. And number 10, this Mercury retrograde is seeing us through eclipse season. The Mercury retrograde starts just after the first eclipse, and it ends by the time it ends, you'll see here, I'm going to go to the 15th. So by the time it ends, we're under the dark moon. And so Mercury turning direct coincides with the conclusion of eclipse season. So there's something about this Mercury retrograde that's also intimately connected to the eclipses. And we know these eclipses are pretty intense. An anaretic degree eclipse, at the last degree of Aries, along with the ruler Mars and its fall in Cancer, a lunar eclipse in Scorpio, along with the ruler Mars and its fall in Cancer. Very powerful, dynamic, Marsy eclipse cycle. And so for that, for Mercury retrograde to be present throughout the whole cycle suggests that this retrograde is helping us to revise or is indicating reversals of circumstance that are pretty intense given the context of seeing us through eclipse season. So just keep that in mind. It's not all Mercury retrogrades are the same. They don't all have the same, they don't all pack the same force, or whatever. So if this one's a little bit more dramatic, that's probably why. But go back to the basics. The need to shake things up, to disturb patterns, to create a little revolution, to seek greater freedom, fixed Earth stuff getting moved around, Venus and Moon stuff getting moved around. So those are the basics to consider. And remember to look at that whole sign house of Taurus in your chart for a more specific understanding of the topics likely to be activated. Okay, well, that's what I've got for today. Hope this is useful for all of you guys. Can't wait to hear your stories as usual. And we have, what did we have? We have some parenting tips for Gemini still coming up tomorrow. And then Saturday, we have a bonus edition video. We did an Astrology of Sports podcast again, previewing the NFL draft. So for some people, it'll be fun bonus content over the weekend. All right, that's what we've got. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.